For our first session, let's welcome Erica Ballast and Mark O'Sullivan, both assessment consultants at the British Council. So, hi Mark and hi Erica.
Hi there.
Hello.
Okay, thank you. So,
Hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's session. My name is Erica Balish. I'm an assessment solutions consultant with the British Council based in Madrid, Spain.
And I'm Mark O'Sullivan, also an assessment solutions consultant based in the UK.
Today we're going to be talking about item writing training, which is crucial for quality assessments, as well as a professional development opportunity for teachers. More specifically, we're going to be looking at an internal item writing training that we've adapted for an external audience, highlighting some of the participant achievements and demonstrated increases in assessment literacy and their professional development. The whole test development process has many facets, all of which have their own sub-processes, yet ultimately work together to complete the test cycle, starting from what is being tested to test design, test development, test preparation, taking the test, scoring tests, and ultimately using the scoring to make decisions. However, in early 2020, the pandemic had started to dramatically interrupt what were considered until that point standard norms and practices. The most obvious being the physical test-taking process, and more test centers were being closed, and therefore more and more universities, schools, and educators had to do their own assessments or write their own assessment tools.
Right. So what we might have considered up until this point were very standard or normalized practices in test-taking and test-taking procedures. Students or candidates would have gone to a test venue to sit a test, and those results and those decisions or outcome would have facilitated them moving into programs of study, either at home or abroad. But when those processes have been disrupted and institutions are now having to make their own tests or make their own decisions on how they can assess candidates being admitted into their institution, things started to become a little bit more disruptive. So what we started to see in terms of anecdotal evidence on conferences, the people that we were meeting, the chatter that was happening around the internet at the time, is that these academics, the tutors, the instructors were being kind of forced into creating tests or making tests of proficiency when they had no experience in this ever before. And this is especially more problematic when you factor in that people were working away from their normal institution. They were working from home, they were outside of their normal comfort zone, and on top of that, they're being asked to create something that they've never been asked to create before.
This situation is what inspired our idea to develop this course. Within the field of testing, tasks or questions are referred to as items. This is because not necessarily every item on a test is a direct question, such as what is your favorite color? Sometimes it might be something like describe a picture or tell me about a time when you were sad. Most testing bodies train their own pool of professional item writers according to specific test specifications. This is true for IELTS as well as for APTIS and all of the other mainstream tests that you may be familiar with. However, that's not to say that these skills are not transferable. Many of the skills that go into item writing are applicable to any test that you might be writing. So, for example, attention to detail, good language skills, and writing ability.
And as we can see here in the graphic, there is, of course, terminology or a meta language associated with the art of item writing. So when we talk about skills being transferable, this doesn't necessarily mean just to be able to write another test, But the art, the science of item writing that's involved around following specifications or adhering to certain standards can be transferred into other areas of academic material development or other skills such as this. So one of the very interesting things that happened once we had developed the course was to actually get a perspective from the educators that participated. And it was important because these reflections and these perspectives mirrored what we had saw back in early February and March of 2020, when people were being asked to write or produce tests and had no real relevant experience in that field or that area.
One educator mentioned that they were particularly interested in the aspect of quality assurance. It was imperative not only to learn how to write good quality test items, but also to ensure that every item that goes into an assessment tool has been through a standardized and structured process of review and editing so that they are all of equal quality.
One educator commented that they would like to learn the language assessment principles. Like many educators, they've been asked to make tests in their school, something that we're probably all familiar with in the past. However, they've often wondered whether the tests that they're making are in line with those principles or the criteria that are being set by the school. In particular, they were interested in receptive skills, as those were a particular focus in their workplace.
Another participant said that they were most interested in how they go about evaluating their students, despite having over 30 years experience teaching. They felt that they needed to acquire valid criteria for assessments in order to make some of these higher stakes decisions. They also said that they wanted to improve their ability to create exams measuring productive skills, because this is really where the focus of English education needs to be these days. The most commonly used test question format is multiple choice questions, or MCQs. This is a very simple yet very reliable item format. It has the benefit of being widely recognized, and therefore test takers and candidates know exactly what to do. It can, to a reasonable degree, assess at lower levels and higher levels of proficiency. For these reasons, it is often the go-to choice for creating a test.
So does that mean it's easy to produce or easy to create a multiple choice question? Well, let's consider these items that are taken from real language tests that have been used for placement, level testing, or proficiency purposes. Take a few moments to consider this first item. So the first thing that stands out is that the phrase odd one out is obviously not universally understood or recognized around the world. So it already sets a question that's not quite clear to test takers.
Not only that, Mark, but also there are multiple possible answers. For example, bunny is a more informal terminology indicating a younger animal, and hare, which is similar to a bunny or a rabbit, is the only option here without double letters in the spelling.
So some people might be led to believe that deer is the odd one out because it's not like the other three options. However, technically, a hare and a rabbit are different species.
So there are multiple issues with this item, and it is not clear what is being tested. Let's look at this second example. Again, it's unclear what the item is testing. Is it testing the use of modals, obligation, or suggestion?
Also, if we're looking at A and B, it looks like they're paired, as in must and must not. But then C and D aren't the correct pairs.
Additionally, there are times or contexts where all options are actually plausible and could give the correct response. There are times where you must wear a hat in church. For example, in the UK, it's often customary to wear a hat to a wedding. Inversely, there are times when you mustn't or shouldn't wear a hat in church as well. So this is another issue with the item.
And of course, candidates who have never been to a church or have no church-going experience, this entire context or question will be unfamiliar to them. So it's not really testing their use of language or their understanding of language.
This topic also falls under the parsnips list, The parsnips list is a list of taboo topics that item writers refer to when creating items, which they generally tend to avoid. So as we mentioned earlier, many test providers train their own professional item writers according to standardized specifications.
So this is what we did. We used the British Council Aptis Item Writer Training as a springboard for the course idea. And because this was an already well-established process, it outlined the essence of what we wanted to produce for our course.
As with any testing organization, this is very much a highly specialized process, and it's often focused, as mentioned earlier, for internal use with an internal audience only. And that usually means that the item writers selected for the training have undergone a very thorough application process, and they have specific skills or previous experience that lends quite well to item writing itself.
But it made really good sense for us to use this because it was already a well-established, well-refined process, and that would make an essential foundation for a really good course.
Using existing, established, comprehensive test specifications is a valuable learning experience for those having to create their own tests. As we talked about earlier, these are often proprietary or strictly confidential information held by most testing bodies. However, the British Council Aptis test has an open policy for its test material, and the technical reports, including the test specifications and the marking criteria, are all publicly available online. When adapting this highly specialized internal training for an external audience, there were a number of factors that had to be considered. The first being the wide range of backgrounds and experience that the participants bring to the course. We wanted to design the course in a way that would benefit the highest number of educators as possible. So we had to consider that some participants might have had previous item writing training or experience as examiners for a well-known testing body. And also some participants might be classroom teachers with very little experience or fresh graduates as well. Given the reality of 2020, we also had to consider how most people would access the training, and online delivery of content and training was the most efficient and effective way to get this to the maximum number of participants. So we also had to think about whether participants would have had previous experience to online training and what that might have looked like, as well as what the adaptation of item writer training might look like in a completely online environment. And this is because the pure nature of item writing is actually very collaborative. Quality item writing depends a lot on a very thorough review process and editing process. So often an item writer will write the first draft of their item and then pass it along to a peer to get some feedback and some preliminary quality assurance checks. They will then make those edits before passing it on to a panel of quality assurance. We also wanted to consider assessment in the local context. As we saw with the educators' perspectives a few slides back, some educators were more focused on receptive skills in their work, and others were focusing more on the productive skills. Also, certain test items may be more familiar in certain regions to different students and to different candidates. So what we did throughout the course and some of the major discussion points was elicit more discussion from the participants themselves about their own testing context, and therefore a reflection and application of the content from the course and in their day-to-day practice.
It is important to remember that sometimes individuals are writing for a global, a wide audience. For example, they're taking in students from overseas, so they need to make test items or tasks that reflect a more global perspective. And at the same time, there's sometimes that local adaptations have to be factored in. They have to use voices or contexts or situations that are more familiar to a local test taker.
Lastly, we have to consider proficiency levels in the target language. So we were delivering this course for English language proficiency, item writer training, and we set the recommended minimum proficiency level at a B2. Item writing does require a high proficiency of language. However, it does not need to be what we might call a native speaker or a fully C1 or C2 level proficiency. That is because of the collaborative nature of item writing. There is a lot of editing and review built into the process. And during this editing and review process, it is not a reflection of the item writer's language ability, but rather just a natural step in the process of ensuring that all items are of a high standard.
And that's right. It's important to remember that item writing is not about having a flair for creative writing per se. It's about being able to follow specifications closely. And even highly proficient users would still receive items that have come back and forth through a number of iterations and review processes before a final item is accepted.
From a business perspective, it's been great to build upon an existing resource within the British Council.
And this is because we're able to cascade or show awareness of a product. But the primary focus here is about the benefit for the course participants, about that professionalized training for individuals. And what we're doing here is we're choosing a platform that's able to deliver a variety of learning interaction patterns. Because what we're trying to do is deliver the fundamental principles of item writing, but also deliver it in a practical way where participants are able to actually engage, to try, and to share their content.
The engagement features on the platform we chose to host the course on are very intuitive and mimic social media. And therefore, participants were much more likely to engage in a natural way where they could comment on each other's posts, get feedback from tutors, as well as like or upvote other people's comments. They could also bookmark participants' comments to refer back to later.
And it's also important to remember that the course participants are working professionals. They're not full-time students, and they need to be able to access materials outside of normal office hours. And this means in their own time, late at night, but also have the added benefit that there's a presence of other students who are going through the same process with them. So it's very encouraging. You want to be able to read what other people have said. You want to be able to comment on what other people have said. And of course, fundamentally, you want to have real-time expert feedback from tutors. And we've got some great tutors on this course who are experts in the field of item writing.
In the development of this course, we had a number of targets and objectives in mind, and thankfully we were able to achieve each of these outcomes. The first being improved assessment quality. So throughout the course, we introduce a number of different task types for all 4 skills, including grammar and vocabulary, listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Throughout the course, participants learn about different task types, what subskills are targeted by these task types, and thus we go far beyond the traditional MCQ type questions. Participants are also able to gain a better understanding of commercial tests. So even if they don't end up developing their own language tests to use within their institutions, they have a better understanding of test constructs and the awareness of subskills being assessed. And therefore, when choosing a commercial ready-made test, they're able to make a better informed decision. The course also uses the CFR framework for all of the test items and through each of the test specifications. Therefore, all participants gain a deeper understanding of proficiency levels and how to target skill areas in each of these CFR levels. This also helps educators select targeted materials that can better help learners on their journey to achieve specific language targets. And overall, teaching in the classroom improves with this additional knowledge around assessment and how to better create items, select materials, and recognize these different proficiency levels in the classroom. So far, we've run the item writer training course with 3 distinct cohorts, and we've had fantastic results that we're very happy to share with you today. The first being that 92% of participants saw a marked improvement in their item writing. Each week they were assigned an item writing assignment, had it reviewed by other participants, and received feedback from their course tutors. And the course culminates with an item writing portfolio in which they do the same types of items again. And therefore we were able to measure their performance and improvement. The next is that 70% of participants were consistently engaged throughout the entire course. Now, this might not seem like quite a high number, but for online courses such as this one, 50% is the standard for a successful course.
And it's important to factor in that this is done over a 10-week period. So factoring in the people's professional work life, and these are done outside of normal work hours. This again was a really good measure of success.
And lastly, when we asked participants to rate the course on a 5-star scale, the average rating was a 4.67 or 4.7. Many participants came away with very positive comments around the course. And some of these comments included reporting that the course was an amazing experience in terms of building upon previous experiences, and a special appreciation for following the specifications and getting detailed feedback from course tutors. We were especially happy to see that participants were particularly satisfied with the course tutors and their knowledgeability as well as approachability, as well as other participants were also very supportive and very friendly. And this is great because one of our main objectives in the development of this course is, again, recreating that collaborative nature in item writing. So this was really great to see.
Okay, thank you, Erica and Mark. Let's see, we have any questions from the audience?
I'd like to thank Graham Stanley. He's already answered a question that somebody's put in. Thank you very much for that, Graham. Perfect answer there. So Graham was talking about parsnips. It's something we mentioned in the presentation. It's an acronym, and it's a guide of some general areas to avoid in item writing, but it's also often used in publication or material development for ESL industry.
Thank you, Mark. There is another question. How we can take this item writing course?
At the moment, the course is available for institutions. So we're able to take group registrations if you are at an institution that would like to register a small cohort. And I'll put the link in the chat box now for the email to get in touch for further information.
Thank you, Erica. There is another question. Would you mind elaborating on how you measure the improvement in the item writing?
Yep, thank you, Amber. So we were very conscious.
Amber Vanderwood.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Amber. We were very conscious of having a certain level of pedagogy built into the course, and we wanted to measure the progress. So the course participants were doing tasks at various CFR levels for all of the skills, And as they were progressing through things like vocabulary and grammar, to reading, to listening, to speaking and writing, then they went into a quality assurance, quality assessment kind of role and module where they took a more critical approach to items. And then for the final assignment, they went back and they had to do the same level and same task of question, but obviously had to have fresh content. For example, if they were doing a B1 grammar and an A2 vocabulary question, they would have to repeat that process, but then taking on board all of the learning elements that they've gained, thinking about parsnips, thinking about the measurement tools. So you could see from the first item they submitted and the last items they submitted on the course that there was a level of progression. And again, because the course tutors, they're experts in item writing, they were assigning what we like to call a traffic light system code. Was it a red for completely rejected, an amber, like your name, for something that's kind of acceptable but needs a lot of work, or a green item? And because we did that from the beginning, the middle, and the very end, we could accurately track the level of what we might call an acceptance rate.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Liberato and Ian ask, when will the next iteration of the course will be available, or when are you running this course again, and what times will you run it? So this is all about dates.
Erica?
I'm just trying to type the response in the chat box as well. At the moment, the course is only available for institutions, so it does require a group of participants to register a course run. The course is 9 weeks in total in terms of content, and then there's the final assignment. And because it's offered to institutions, we're able to adapt the overall course length to accommodate for holidays, school breaks, etc., anything like that. Or if the group would like to move at a slightly slower pace to accommodate for their regular workloads, that's also a possibility. And we've set the minimum participants around 15, but again, there's a bit of wiggle room there as well.
Thank you, Erica. I think that you have been answering all the questions, and that's great. Liberato is asking, where can we find more info about the course, including a price list for groups?
So yes, thank you, Liberato. Erica's put an email there. If you send a question in regarding course price, next iteration, whether it's available, you can email her there. And Ian, I can see, is asked about whether an internal consideration is done. Absolutely, Ian. Yes, it's already factored in. It's already on the cards. And often we were looking at a local British Council office and teachers or staff from those institutions doing it at the same time as maybe a local institution, like a local university, so that we're able to pair British Council expertise and the expertise in the local institution and marry the two together.
Okay. Thank you, Mark and Erica. It was a fantastic presentation. So it's time to finish this session. Please come back in 5 minutes to start our next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Farah.
Thank you so much.